Muted.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're doing well and all the snow is melting in your areas. Um, Today I'm very excited to get the opportunity to speak with you guys about autism, basically. So in the title it says autistic traits, and it's very rare that I say autistic. I'm very cognizant about using person-first language, so I'll probably be speaking more in that way and saying that people with autism, adults with autism, or so forth. So just want to throw that out there before we begin. Okay. So we are going to talk about a few things today. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to send those through the chat box and I will answer them as I see them. Okay, so we're going to take a look at autism as it was way back in the 60s and what it looks like now. We're going to talk about those traits. We're going to talk about the wonderful gifts that come with autism and the strengths and interests. We're also going to talk about what employees with autism can do to be more successful in the workplace and what employers can do to help facilitate that. We'll talk about some things to consider, and then again, if you have any other questions, we will discuss that. So how many of you have seen Rain Man? So this was my first introduction to autism back in '88. And Dustin Hoffman actually did a very nice job portraying an adult male with autism, although he portrayed one who has savant skills. And savant skills are those types of skills that you are extremely gifted in one specific area. For him, it was counting cards. Now, I have not met anyone who could count cards who has autism since Rain Man, but I'm still looking, someone to take to Vegas with me. So back in the early 90s, the incidence prevalence rate was 1 in 5,000 people were diagnosed with autism. But now, the prevalence rate is 1 in 68. And so you can see on the screen here how it's being portrayed in the media. We have Sheldon Cooper, my favorite man with autism, Temple Grandin. We have a few doctors. This is Doc Martin on a BBC show. This is a visiting doctor on Grey's Anatomy. We have Parenthood. We have Sherlock. We have a variety of different House, of course, a variety of different media depictions of autism. And so it's hard for anyone to go a day without really hearing about autism, autism spectrum disorders. Perhaps you know someone with autism. Perhaps someone in your family has autism. So it's pretty in your face these days. So this is kind of a trend of how things have progressed over the years. And this is from the CDC. And you can see how it's the increase is substantial from the 70s to 2013, and it just continues to rise. There was a recent news blurb about 1 in, I want to say 48, and that was parent survey. So again, the research is a little sketchy about how we're getting those numbers, but the most relevant one is 1 in 68 right now. Okay, so what's changed? So this is Bill Gates, and this is his 1975 picture. I'm glad he's updated his glasses. And this is around 2015. So besides the fact that he's gotten older, what has changed? So back in the 70s, someone, oh, sounds like we've lost sound. Is that true?
We can still hear you, Stacy.
Okay, great. So back in the 70s, there were individuals who were kind of quirky, who maybe were really good at science. They wanted to be by themselves a little bit more. They liked to build things. Early computer programming on those huge, big computers. Those are the things that they would do. Maybe not so interested in going to parties or going to dances or football games or things like that. And so we call those loners, quirky people, geeks, nerds, whatever. And so now, in 2016, those same people may have a diagnosis of autism. And so what's changed? Well, a lot of things have changed. Our diagnosis procedure is much more stringent. We have more people, particularly physicians, psychologists, education folks who are able to diagnose autism. And we also have genetics. And so those quirky folks back in the 70s have kids. They got married, had kids, and oftentimes they have a child who will fall on the autism spectrum. So genetics is one of the biggest things that research has pointed to as far as links to autism. There's, obviously lots of talks about environmental triggers. There's, vaccinations, which was a big sort of go-to years ago, and that is not founded. So right now, genetics is the major link. So quirky, eccentric, or difficult. Sometimes all of those. So for people with autism, you can expect very blunt, honest answers. So if you don't want the truth, don't ask. I remember early on in my career working with young kids on the spectrum who this was their first social skills group that they had together. And I was lining everyone up, and this young boy came up to me and he asked me if I was pregnant. No, I am not pregnant. Maybe I've gained a few pounds, but I'm not pregnant. So it's things like that that are a little interesting. So what are some defining traits? Some of the things that, a lot of us are pretty good at small talk. We'll talk about the weather. We'll talk about, the Super Bowl. We'll talk about the Grammys. Just brief, small, water cooler type conversations. Well, folks on the spectrum are not that good at this. Either they're not necessarily interested in those types of small talk conversations, or their conversations become sort of monologues about what they're interested in. So, let's say there is a water cooler and you go and you're on a break and you say, hey, how's it going? How are things? And perhaps the person with autism will go into sort of a monologue about a bug in their computer or virus or something that they saw on TV that they are very interested in, not taking into account that you're not interested or that this is supposed to be a brief conversation. Blunt. So again, if you don't want the truth, don't ask. And blunt to the point of potentially maybe upsetting the person they're speaking with. I work with adults who are in college who have autism, and oftentimes in class they know more than the professor, and that's pretty warranted sometimes, but they will tell the professor that, no, you're wrong, this is the right answer, and I know. And as you can imagine, professors do not take well to that. So then they come across as arrogant. They can come across as very rigid. It's my way or the highway, or I've done it this way for 3 years and this is how it's going to go. You can't ask me to change. So you can see how some of these things could be a little bit difficult in the workplace. Sometimes there's complaining, and it's not necessarily complaining. It might be pointing out things that are troubling to them. And sometimes we complain as well when people talk too loud, or there's a weird smell from the lunchroom refrigerator, or things that would bother us. Well, they may perseverate on this and come across as complaining, and it's not really. It's just trying to get their way, their sensory issues known. So there are also blunders, so things like standing too close to someone or shouting when you're supposed to be speaking quietly. We talk with people with autism a lot about eye contact. And so there's eye contact where you look at a person, you kind of look away, you don't necessarily stare at them. But more recently I was actually speaking with a man who self-identifies as having Asperger's syndrome, and he stared at me the whole time. And he was being very, I mean, we were having a pretty decent conversation, but I said, so when you look at me in the eye constantly, it's a little creepy. So it's kind of those social blunders, not knowing those things that we kind of take for granted. Additionally, there are things like not being able to take into account the nonverbal cues that we give off during conversations. So if we fold our arms or look away or put our hands on our hips, those all mean things. Well, to someone with autism, that means nothing. And so they don't necessarily understand that if I'm looking away and my arms are folded, I'm bored and I don't care. So those are the things that can get them into trouble as well. Sometimes their expressions get muddled, so they may be coming across as that they're excited, but their facial expressions look angry, or they're happy, but they have a scowl on their face. And you kind of have to try to understand, okay, you're telling me that you're happy, but your face is showing me that you're not. Can you explain which it is? Perspective taking is another big issue here. So it's hard to put your other person hat on. So being able to say, oh, hey, we both have opinions about this specific thing, and I can see where you're coming from. So not being able to understand that if I don't want to do something, it's okay for me to feel that way. Or if I feel that this opinion is correct, it's okay. So being able to take the perspective of someone else. And this is often termed as theory of mind or mind blindness in the research. So this is something that also in the workforce can be troubling. Back to the expressions muddled, so face and words don't always match. If you're smiling, to me that means that you're happy. But if you're saying, I hate you, and you're smiling, that's weird. So making sure that face and words match and they understand when you're looking at other people too, that being able to look at eyebrows and gaze and corners of mouth and stuff to understand how a person is feeling. So we have autism, we have all those social issues that go on, but there's also this big area of sensory stuff. So sometimes, and I know that I have lots of sensory issues with people, and I don't have autism, but things like clicking pens, snapping gum, crunching really loud, cologne. There's some cologne that smells like roses that I don't think smells like roses, but people wear. Really bright fluorescent lights are annoying and give me a headache. So they're annoying to me, and some of those may be annoying to you, but for someone with autism, it is painful. So things like fluorescent lights is a big one. Someone who may be listening to music on their headphones so that no one else hears, well, maybe the person with autism can't hear it and it sounds very muffled, but it's maddening almost to them. Repetitive noises, so the clicking of the pen might be annoying to me, but might send the person into this meltdown phase, where if they get into this sensory overload, they are unable to focus on anything else. So not everything is bad with autism. So I've painted a pretty bleak picture. It's not, I wouldn't be in the field if I thought that it was all bad. There are gifts, and they're actually quite amazing. So focus is the amazing thing. So if you are able to focus on something for a long period of time, you're pretty successful. You are able to get things done. You complete a task very well. I am not very focused. So I have lots of different projects going on, and I kind of flit from one to another. For someone with autism, they may be hyper-focused on the project that you give them and will see it from beginning to end, and it will be extremely detailed and very worked on very diligently. They take a lot of pride in their work, so they're not going to necessarily give you something that's not their best quality. They're going to make sure that it's perfection to them. They want to please. Being able to show that they are capable and able, and they can complete a task, complete an assignment, a project, to get recognition, and not recognition as in hey, let's have a party kind of recognition, but just, hey, you did a great job, sometimes is all that it takes. Or even an email, nice work. Very independent. So a lot of people do teamwork type activities. So you have a project and you have to work with a lot of different people to get everyone's parts done. People with autism, they can do this independently and be very focused and able to provide you with a finished product that is stellar. Excuse me. So the upside is very independent, could be very good at self-starting and finishing. Downside might be that they're not going to be the best team player in the group work. Very good attention to detail. If you have specific criteria for something, they're going to follow the criteria to a fault almost. I have others that I work with that I give them my project and say, okay, please look at punctuation, grammar, spelling, spacing, all of that, because I don't have great attention to detail, but they are absolutely good at that sort of thing. Honesty. So, like I said before, there was the issue with, you know, you look pregnant. I was very honest. Apparently, I was looking heavy in what I was wearing. Perhaps I was heavy at the time. So there is complete honesty. They're not good liars. So if you want to know the truth about something, they'll be very good at telling you what it is. I work with a lot of families, and parents will say, you know, I know that if my other child has done something, I go to my son or daughter with autism because they're going to tell me the truth and be completely honest. So even if it's going to cause strife between siblings, they're going to be telling the truth. Logic over emotion. So sometimes our hearts and our emotions get in the way of completing tasks, getting things done. That's often not the case for people on the spectrum. So very logical, can make kind of a flow chart of pros and cons and make a decision based on that, where others may get hung up in those emotions and belabor some points. A very unique perspective. We often, I'll speak for myself, I often kind of get lost in the weeds sometimes, and so I'll ask someone on the spectrum their input and their feedback, and I get a very clear, crisp perspective that I necessarily wouldn't have taken or understood before. And so they give that to me, and it makes me rethink how I'm presenting, rethink how I'm portraying my research or what have you, and I find it very valuable. So they have much higher fluid intelligence. Now, they can take what you give them and embed it into what their framework of thinking is and be able to understand things at a very higher level. Generalization might not always be there, unfortunately. So in this situation, I can do X, Y, and Z, but you change location, you change parameters, and you may need some time to rework that that procedure, because generalization is not always easy. Very visual. So this is three-dimensional thinking. So we kind of I'm a visual learner as well, visual thinking, and if I do something, I'm much more apt to understand it than if I were to read about it or hear about it. And this is almost always true for people with autism too. The language, the back and forth, the conversations, the nuances get in the way. So visual representation really is very concrete and makes them much more aware of what information is being shared with them. Lots of natural strengths and interests. I love this cartoon. So there's kind of a saying that dogs have ADHD and cats have Asperger's syndrome. And I think that might be absolutely true. So they are very quick to be very focused on what is expected of them. So if it's not in their framework of job responsibilities, if it's not in their job description, then they're not going to do it unless you add it into their job description, give them a specific task, write it down, and share it with them. So they're not ignoring you, it's just not in their job description, and so it doesn't exist. So making sure that whatever the tasks are outlined and made clear will make that much easier. So what can employees do? So these are the folks with autism. You know, I always say disclose if you like. Some people who are more impacted by their autism and need support for job interviews, for maybe some job development, I absolutely say disclose, because you want to be in an environment where the employer knows your strengths and knows the supports that you need to be successful. And if you need support from an additional person, like a job coach or an employment specialist, then you need to disclose so that that person can be in the loop. However, if you are more like Sheldon Cooper on the Asperger side of things, then disclosure is a little bit more gray. So I recently was speaking with a gentleman who was interviewing for a job. He's on the Asperger's side of autism, and he asked if he should disclose. And he has gotten jobs in the past independently and been successful. And I said, you know, I don't think that in the interview that would be something that you should do. And, you know, you've been successful in the past. Here are some strengths that you have. Here's some things that you could do in the interview. If you do get the job and you find that there are things that supports that you need, then I would suggest that you talk to your employer, your boss, as here are the things that I need to be successful in my job. Just as, you know, someone may say, hey, can you do this for me in passing, and I say, hey, can you send me an email because by the time I get back to my office I'm going to forget. It's a support that I need, and so it's the same sort of thing. If they need supports and can do the job, can be effective without disclosing, I would suggest speaking about strengths and areas of need and supports that are needed. That's not to say that if you want to disclose that you shouldn't, absolutely, but I know that there's a big concern, well, if I disclose, people are going to treat me differently, and so that's my perspective on that. Use your area of strength. So if you are very good at something, that's the things that you should be sharing. Those are the things that you should be highlighting in your job. Request accommodations, don't demand. I've worked with people who, and I do some life coaching types of things also, and this one woman said, you know, I went into my boss's office and I told him, you need to change all the lights in this building, this floor that I work on, because they are just bothering me. Okay, well that's demanding and that's expensive, and that's not a way to get your needs met. So we talked about, well, another way you could have said that is, hey, in my office I work with 3 other people, could we have lamps instead of the overhead lights, and meet with your suite mates to see if that was acceptable to them, and then bring that to your boss. So learning how to request instead of demand. Refraining from being a know-it-all. This is this happens in college a lot. So this is the student in class who is going to go on a monologue about how the professor is wrong about his what he's talking about. And it's okay to know it all or think you know it all, but it's different if you share that you're a know-it-all. So in conversations, making sure that if you disagree quietly, or bring a point of clarification, but not be a know-it-all. Practice. This is something that, unless you put yourself in a situation where you have to practice being social and being appropriate, you're not going to be able to do it. So practice tact, empathy, humor, humility. Learn nonverbal skills. Learn how to understand them. Learn how to portray nonverbal cues appropriately. One individual that I know, he very successful, has been with a company for a very long time, computer engineer, and he worked in an office, and they closed the office and said everyone's going to be telecommuting. That was the worst thing that could happen for him, because he worked from home then. So he didn't have the opportunity to practice tact, empathy, humor, humility, nonverbal cues. He didn't see anybody unless he went to the grocery store. So those things that he had to do every day because he worked in an office, he wasn't able to practice. When in doubt, leave it out. So a lot of times people on the spectrum will just say what's on their mind. There's some frontal lobe is the center of your brain that deals with emotion regulation, being able to filter, being able to make that perspective pause before you say things. And this kind of develops in your 20s and sometimes late 20s. For people with autism, sometimes it's a lot longer than that. So if I think it, it comes out of my mouth. And that's sometimes what happens and can get folks into trouble. And then learning some coping strategies. So if there's something that's bothering you, learning how to take deep breaths, go take a walk, maybe go get some water, learning how to deal with situations that are not particularly comfortable for you, and doing this gracefully. And again, this goes back to the practice piece. If you don't practice, you're not going to be able to engage in those coping strategies when you need to. So what can employers do? Find out what your employees' interests are and work towards those. So if you know that someone with autism is working with you and they're really interested in Doctor Who, then maybe use that as small talk, and that might be a nice way to engage them socially. Or maybe they're very interested in NASCAR, and that's something that you can speak to them about. And so you're working on those social skills and showing interest in things that are outside of work for them. Structure, routine, and deadlines. If you provide structure and routine and have deadlines clearly written and kind of a task analysis of what is needed to be done, it will be done. When there is routine and structure, it will get done and get done well. If there's vague references, well, I'd like you to do this, and if you can get it to me by sometime in March, it'll be maybe March 31st when you get it. So making sure that there's that structure in place. Do not mandate social skills. So, you know, a lot of times there's office parties and you know, it's someone's birthday and everyone's going to get in the lunchroom and we're going to have cake and sing happy birthday. Do not require them to do that. It sometimes can make them very uncomfortable. Mention that these things are happening and say, you know, hey, we'd really like it if you would come, but don't make that as part of their job requirements or something that they should feel bad about not doing. If they need accommodations, allow for that. A lot of people need accommodations for whatever reason. So if they need different lighting, I'm not saying change lighting in the whole building. I'm saying, you know, if they need a lamp at their desk instead of the overhead lighting, that seems like a reasonable accommodation. If they need things written out instead of verbally explained to them, that seems like a reasonable accommodation. But making the effort is extremely important. Don't get offended. And sometimes I have a hard time remembering this because it sometimes comes across, some of the conversations and comments come across as pretty hurtful. And they're not trying to be hurtful. There's just sometimes a lack of tact. And again, if they don't get practice, they will often offend more frequently than not. And if you are offended, or if they say something that was offensive, giving feedback is absolutely okay. So to the young boy back years and years ago, I said, I am not pregnant and you should not talk to women about their weight. So something you can say instead is that a new sweater? Or if you feel like you need to say something, here are some things that you can say. But making sure that they have that feedback so that hopefully in the future they will not say something offensive on that topic. Support them without scrutiny. So if they need feedback on steps of a project along the way, absolutely support them, but don't hyperanalyze. Or if they have a certain way of doing things, if the job gets done, it gets done the right way, then I feel like it's absolutely acceptable. You know, I have a fourth grade son, and he's doing long division, and I don't agree necessarily with how the teacher's teaching with big boxes and little boxes and in circles with hash lines to learn long division. Just, okay, 3 goes into 3 one time, that sort of thing. But if that's what he needs to do his math, he should absolutely be able to do that. Same thing as if he needs to do it in his head and he can do it accurately, let him do it that way too. Address concerns effectively. So if there's a concern that's brought to you by other employees or by an individual with autism, address them effectively. So making sure that everyone's perspective is heard and making sure that there's consequence or feedback given in an effective way. Model acceptance, not tolerance. So one of the things that there's the autism awareness movement, and there's, you know, tolerate differences. Well, tolerance is and awareness is okay, but part of the issue is moving beyond that and being able to accept differences and accept that not everyone does something the way you do it, and they may do it differently and maybe even better. So being able to accept the differences and accept neurodiversity. Praise goes a long way. Giving and receiving praise. How do you guys feel when you get praise? Pretty good, right? So that's the same for everybody. It doesn't mean that if you have autism you don't like to be told that you're doing a nice job. And the people that, if there's a person with autism and they're in a field that they love, they are going to shine. And if they love their work and they receive praise for it, that is the best feeling in the world. And I mean, the same thing goes for us. You know, if you go to work every day and you do great things and you don't hear about it, I mean, a paycheck's nice, but you kind of need a pat on the back every once in a while. So here's just a little bit of something that I put together for people kind of learning about themselves. So this is kind of a dissection of their strengths and areas of needs. So they like working by themselves, dislike when people talk to me about sports, I don't like my job, the guy across from me is stupid. So here are some things that they may say or in a day that may or may not impact their work. So those negative thoughts can sometimes be perseverative and get you away from meeting deadlines. So if you come into work and someone's talking to you about sports and I hate sports, you're going to think about that perhaps all day. Instead, you can say something like, I don't really like sports, but maybe the next time I see him, I can start a conversation about something I like. Or instead of thinking the guy across from me is stupid, you can say, the guy across from me, he doesn't seem to know as much as I do, but he's good at. So it's a way of changing your thoughts and your cognitions so that it's a more positive way of thinking. And this is some of the cognitive behavior therapy type stuff that I do with individuals on the spectrum that kind of helps get them out of this negative, kind of depressed sort of way about thinking about themselves and others. So part of the things that sometimes happens is they get into trouble for saying something inappropriate at work. So for this example, this is the same woman who went in and demanded different lights throughout the building. She also told the receptionist that she worked with to stop chewing her gum like a cow. And the person said, go to hell, and then spoke to her boss. And instead of apologizing, she kind of escalated things, and it ended up that she lost her job eventually. What she could have done is say, hey, I'm sorry, Kim, I didn't mean to be so blunt, but I'm trying to get this project done, and your gum chewing is distracting me. So this is a think sheet that helps people kind of go back and play through what happened so that they can learn from their social faux pas and perhaps apply that to the next time that they are with someone. There's this great thing called the hidden curriculum, and so we learn things by doing and getting feedback for them or watching other people. So hidden curriculum are things that we take for granted because we just do them. For people with autism, it is hidden because they don't understand why it's happening. So sometimes women go to the bathroom together, but men don't. So instead of when noticing that when women go to the bathroom, they go in twos or threes, and then saying, oh, maybe when everyone goes to the bathroom, they have to go in pairs. And then when a guy gets up from the table, they go too, which would be inappropriate. Learning that this rule about bathroom etiquette. You know, you shouldn't really comment on someone's age, weight, physical differences. So, hey, those glasses are ugly, or oh, you look pregnant, or gosh, you're old. Those are things that you shouldn't say. So knowing that that's a rule, and if you come across as thinking, oh, these are some rules to live by, that actually is a pretty helpful way of thinking about things. Don't sit next to someone if there's an empty seat. If you are on a bus and you know the whole bus is open, but there's one person sitting in the seat, don't sit right next to them. You can sit in the seat across from them or what have you. These are things that we all know and take for granted, but folks on the autism spectrum wouldn't think twice about it. So this is called the hidden curriculum, and there are books out there that address this, and you can Google this as well. All right, questions. I think we have about 15-20 minutes for questions. If I went over something too fast, let me know.
So I just want to remind everyone to use the chat window to ask any questions you may have. And while we're waiting for people to put their questions in the chat window, if you have attended and your name isn't on the attendee list, please type in your name as well in the chat window.
If you leave and then have questions, by all means, you can email me. That's the best way. I respond pretty quickly to email. I'm not always in my office to get phone messages.
Stacy, it doesn't look like anyone is putting any questions in the chat window, so we can wait here another few minutes if you'd like.
That's fine.
So it looks like we have a question. This is coming from Emily Sargent. Any notes on those who are borderline?
Borderline autism, borderline personality disorder, borderline what?
Autistic traits.
Notes as, I guess, clarify what information is needed.
See if we can, maybe we can unmute Emily and see if she can see. Emily, you've been unmuted if you'd like to.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think I have. Yes? I was just thinking how many people that I know that have some or most of these traits. So I just wondered if you had any perspective as far as, you know, you don't necessarily have someone who is clinically autistic, but you know how to, if you have any general suggestions on ways to include more people who are in between. Just a random thought.
Yeah, so I walk around all day long thinking, you could be on the spectrum, you could be on the spectrum, and you know, there's lots of science fiction books saying that the spectrum is going to be the new normal and whatever. But you know, I think the one piece of including them in social activities and not force it, but the more that you offer and you give opportunities for them to be included, the better. If there are things that they do that are odd or different, just giving some gentle feedback about what that is so that they can learn from it, I think is important as well. Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
On the side note, there's Wired magazine has a autism quotient online autism evaluation of symptoms, characteristics, and you can take that to see where you fall on the spectrum, if you fall at all. And I've actually given that to my brother and a few other people that I know. It's kind of interesting to see the different things that, you know, preferences of being by yourself, you know, having one or two friends, close friends, not wanting to talk about frivolous things. Those are all things that are considered, you know, autism type characteristics. But a lot of people are that way, you know, and the more that the more technology we have, I think the more we're going to see more and more people fall into that category of preferring to be alone, communicating via email, not wanting to talk on the phone. Those social skills are kind of falling away because we're so technologically savvy these days. Just a hypothesis. Okay,
Thank you.
Another question. When working with young adults, is there any research pointing to a distinction between ASD and regular frontal lobe development manifestations? I don't know about anything specific, but I do know that the frontal lobe development, the full development happens late 20s. So that's why, you know, the drinking age is 21. That's why 25, at 25, your insurance rates for your car goes down, because at that point you're having your ability to self-manage and regulate yourself heightens. In the teens and early 20s and emerging adulthood, that is not necessarily the case. But now I want to look into that. Thank you, Beth.
So do we have any other questions for Staci? Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we can conclude our presentation. On behalf of ASQ 1108, I'd really like to thank Dr. Staci Carr for presenting on today's topic. I would like to remind everybody that there is a survey link at the top of the chat window. It's www.tinyurl.com/1108 meeting. That is our survey for this meeting. So we really greatly appreciate any feedback you can provide. And if that's all, looks like Staci, we can see your chat, the chat window. Oh, okay. And we can provide feedback to you.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
And I do work at VCU Autism Center for Excellence, and there's a lot of online free webcasts and online courses and fact sheets and wonderful things like that. So if anyone's interested, please feel free to go to that website and look at all of our resources.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.